Good evening and most welcome to H707, 707. And we have nightfall here in Sweden. Well, it's been night for a couple of hours already, although it's little before 8. And it's particularly cold today. We had loads of snow, as we can see on the windows. Even here in, you go down a little bit, you can see the window. Yeah, the window is filled with snow. It's soon going to be snowed in here. It's going to be very interesting. Today I will talk a little bit more about something that often translated to the word detachment. This can give maybe wrong associations, but we don't have a much better word for it. But detachment, it's like being at liberty to choose one's reactions. So detachments is a little bit like we have stuck actions, reactions, and we loosen up that stuckness so we can react more freely, more open. And as we know in Alexander technique, I couldn't lower that lamp a little bit, I get in my eyes. A bit of the, can you see now?
Yes.
We are familiar with the instinctive reaction of pull down. Whenever we get the stimulus to sit down, we are going to stiffen up. We are going to brace ourselves. Brace ourselves means like taking hold of ourselves. And we will hold our breath in the process. So we stop the breath when we go down. But we need to see this movement clearly, and I've been pondering about that. Tried to sit down a couple of times, and it's like a lack of consciousness in that moment when I sit down. It disappears. And we need to stop the disappearance of the consciousness, I think. We need to know what's happening. And that is the ultra slow movement, because in that moment what we do is being clear and obvious to our senses, otherwise not. And I cannot notice when I do it quickly, oh, it doesn't matter how slow I do it, I can't notice my stiffen up, but now I at least noted that there is a bracing. So this ultra slow process is doing its work. It's sending signals to the neurological system of adjustment. And next time you do the same movement, there will be an automatic adjustment done. And this is nothing less than a complete readjustment of the whole corporal mind system. And there we can have a clearer movement and a clearer movement and a clearer thinking. And that clearer thinking is that you can actually feel your thoughts having active force. What you think has an effect. And this is most important. I'm going to get into that a little bit more later, but remember that the thinking has an effect. That's very important. And we have normally, I mentioned the last lecture 706, this object in space in front of subject. That is also a security game. A security game of holding and fixing. We need to fix the reality to see it or understand it. We fix ourselves, we tense ourselves, The first thing we do is lock our ankles, and then we lock our knees and lock our hips. And this locking process go all the way up, and you are tense and flappy, both things at the same time. But this requires clarity. You need to see it. Actually, it's enough to see it for you to adjust the whole thing. The moment you see what you actually are doing, you're going to stop, because that command you have. And I think that's rather obvious. The reason why we do all this bad stuff must be because we don't see it, we don't feel it. It's a little bit, our movements are so habitual, it feels like they're happening awfully quick, and I have no command of them. And if you don't believe that, I have a friend who scratches his face or her face, and I thought that person had command of that. I said, isn't it better not to scratch your face because blood is coming out of the face and all that? And I got a response, no, I can't do it. So what is habitual for one person beyond any sort of influence, so it just happens, that can actually be quite complex things. It can be very complex things. And I noticed the most complex thing I did today, I was actually paying the bank. And while I did that, I did not know what was happening. So I had to check it afterward that it was correct. But that was a rather complex thing to do on the mobile with everything. Just happened. So we can train us to do loads of things. And once we initiate it, it cannot be stopped. And that's important. It's exactly the same if you meet somebody in a narrow alleyway and that person can't move out of the way, sort of fit with each other. That's a fixed position. That person cannot alter. And that lack of altering is a sort of lack of freedom as well. It's not only stiffness and tensity, it's also a very severe lack of freedom in thinking. The thinking pattern moves in ruts, you could say. Once you wake up in the morning, everything is fixed for the whole day. It's actually rather interesting. And I would say this sort of approach, aiming to solve the problem of quantum physics while solving the problem of the non-dual nature of the world, actually applies to little things like this. Nothing is an exception, but it could be different depending which subject it is. But the secret is in the preparation. How you prepare what you do has a significant effect on the performance. That is the secret. Alexander practiced inhibition, he called it. And that's sort of similar to detachment. Inhibition is when somebody throws something to you and you decide, should I catch it or should I just leave it be? That's inhibition. Detachment is similar in that way. It's you get a fortress, you get your regular thoughts, and the thought pops up somewhere to grab another ice cream, I don't know, and you don't follow it. Could be anything. That's detachment. But we need, when we hear the word detachment, we think of some sort of arduous task or Feynman from Joyous Things. That's not what's implied in detachment. Detachment is the training in being able to resist immediate responses, so that you can choose what you want to do yourself. This is to make your will working again. It's actually a way out of determinism, because we've been discussing determinism in connection to classical physics. There has to be a corporal mirroring here. Must be something in the body that mirrors classical physical view of determinism. And that is, most people today are actually determined from the outset. There's not much they have or can do to change what's happening to them in their lives. And obviously, otherwise they wouldn't believe in classical physics. Why would classical physics be something for anybody who's not working with it actively? If you're not an engineer, why would you bother? I think the reason is we are deterministic. We are thinking that we are soulless zombies or something like that. And that's the reason for we stick to that physics. Because there's so many people I've met and talked to who doesn't have the vaguest idea of any physics. But you can be damn sure that they are deterministic. That you can be sure of. And that I think we are nothing more than pretty advanced robots. They will not, however, express that view in the same words. That's another thing. But they have similar views. And I think, my theory is that that view is coming from classical physics, or the static body movement is causing the idea of classical physics in these people, and most people, I'd say. So this stiffening process, it's taken in regard all aspects of reality, and that's rather interesting. So the detachment or the inhibition, it means just a training to make you free in your actions. And it also means, and this is the point of today here, that your thinking becomes stronger. What on earth could that mean? What do I mean by that? Well, let's take an example here. The very famous violist Primrose, William Primrose. Excellent use of himself. It's beyond belief when you watch him in the movies. Some film clip is incredible. You can look at this through the lenses of the Alexander technique or Zen, because he had this fluidity to him, this ease of doing, that made it possible for him to reach his full potential. And everyone has this inborn potential. We have the capacity to do whatever we want. And why it's so good with Primrose is that even to an untrained eye you can see he has an excellent use. He moved about even at an advanced age like 60, 70, like he were, what, say 14, 15, something like that. There's no strain. It looks so easy that you start wondering, should I take up the viola? Well, you should not, because that instrument is the toughest of them all. It's known to be tough, but in his hands it looks like he was holding a toothbrush and moving it with the same ease. And without a problem he produced notes that are impossible to conceive of, to be possible to hear, not even to produce. It's just excellent. And that is the effect of inhibition or detachment. Because when you choose yourself, all these things that bothers you, one by one they fall away. When you see through your movement, you just have to see them. All the bad stuff start to evaporate. You become more balanced, and this process after a while catches on. So he said himself, when somebody asked him about his ability, now there are students many years younger than I who practice this etude seriously, very hard, and their hand is never terribly facile. But we must remember that to an extent dexterity lies in an inherent muscular and nervous system. So what he means by a hand that's facile, yeah, it is easy. That's the easiness of the stuff. So he said that is part and parcel why it worked so well, because it was so easy at the same time, completely playful. It doesn't make sense, does it? It becomes so wonderful because it's so easy. We usually think it should be hard, especially when playing such difficult notes as he did. And I watched a couple of movies actually, and there was especially this one which I can recommend, about Marie Murray, the famous French composer of the Baroque. Actually played by the son of Gérard Depardieu, I don't remember his first name. But when he was playing the cello in the movie, he was putting a lot of effort into, because he was so beautiful. And I was just thinking to me, this is not him playing. Of course, in a way, I should understand that directly, because he's an actor, he's not a cello player. So, but in some obvious way, that's what he perceives it is to be a good musician. Putting in a lot of effort, being tensed. He was sweating at the end almost. He looked too happy. But that was his performance on Marie Murray. Well, I checked it up. I could see who played it from the beginning, and it was of course the famous Jordi Savall. And I looked it up when he played the same, very same melody, and he had his same ease. That was easy for him. He didn't actually look like he was doing much job anyway. Why pay him millions and millions? Well, oddly enough, it's connected to the easiness. We gain a sense of ease. What we don't gain when we're using our hands and arms and legs before the central structure, that is economy of movement. We lose that. We lose everything that is facile, as he says, light, elegant, exact. Exactness disappears. And he also adds that the younger students, well, the ones who were younger at this instance are probably old by now, they trained a lot. But here's a problem. If you train a lot and you do something wrong from the beginning, that could actually worsen the case. And this rings a bell. It's similar to what Patrick MacDonald said. He was a little bit like a guru of the Alexander technique. And he says, exercises, particularly those calculated to bring about relaxation, will in nearly every case exaggerate the unwanted condition. Only those who use their bodies in is extremely good can do exercise with impunity. Only when we have very good use can the exercise we do be facile, light, and not strenuous, and not arduous, and done with a smiling face. Otherwise, they will be harmful. So primrose is a good example of what we actually can reach. And this is so high up, it could feel too high up. So I will bring another example who's very much closer to our world than this enormous genius. Well, it has to do with habits, and habits are changeable. But this habit is a bit different. We've been talking about habits before, and they are all either changeable, or you can give them up, or you can start new ones. But this habit has a special characteristic that makes it a little bit difficult, is that you can't see it. Somebody else can point it out. And somebody can point out to me that I'm using the fan in the wrong direction. And oh, that's why nothing comes. Then I can change and use this one. But when it comes to this, it's so ingrained and so habitual that pointing it out actually doesn't do anything. You are not aware. And it's this with the timing. We have an internal timing agent, and the timing is the problem, because these things are happening too quick for our consciousness to notice. The feedback system, what actually is happening, that we are misusing ourselves, doesn't receive the information, goes too quickly. And we need to rid ourselves that time always passes in the same speed. Because when I open this, this will be fairly slow. But where I stand up, that will happen so quick in this internal timing that I will not be able to see what I'm doing. And if you're not able to see or feel what you're doing, you cannot adjust it. That's my conviction. There's no chance of adjusting something that goes so quick you don't react to it. And if you hear somebody say something, you just have to trust that person. Now, in this case that's okay, but in this case of standing up, we need to actually feel what we're doing wrong, at least to some extent. Not the whole thing at once. That will not, of course, happen. But a little bit, and the little bit in this case goes a long way, because that will be the very first time in your life that you actually change an ingrained habit. It never happened before. But think about that. And also think about, we know that ingrained habits have a tendency to reproduce. And when they get above a certain limit, when 70 to 75% of our daily habits are ingrained, they will rush. They will take over your whole life. So in the end, you will be unconscious even of longer, more complicated things. And then you will definitely be in a rut. And in that case, there's no stepping out of what you're stuck in, because this will lead to higher and higher perceived speed from an internal basis. The whole life will pass so quickly, so you won't even notice the years are passing. My other example is more to earth, not so elegant, and that's General Patton. George Smith Patton. He had a rather good use. He didn't have this excellent use. And he didn't use his hands. He didn't use his thighs, legs, feet, or anything like that. But he had good use of his thinking power that came from his good use of his body / spirit. body-mind combination. And that made him a very fast acting general. He was most known for acting very fast. And one start to think, how do you do when you act fast? Do you have to be very quick? No, you actually have to be very slow. This cannot be this quick. This process needs to be internally clocked very slow. And that was actually how it went for General Patton. He actually mentioned these things. When he moved about, it took ages. Not on the external surface, but for himself. And that makes it possible when you are moving slower than your enemy. You will have the ability to strike first. And this is the most interesting thing with this timing thing. When you are moving slower internally, the other person will move quicker. And you can anticipate his movement. You can sort of slip in between two of his movements. Because in one of his movements you have 2 or 3 or 4 movements. And that's the important thing in acting quick. And that was true both in the small thing, well, small, the Second World War was nothing small, but also in the even bigger picture. When General Smith-Batten came to Berlin for the peace conference, he had only one thing to say to his other generals, that we should get into our tanks and we should get on with the process. And I just asked, what? Well, the enemy is still standing here, and he was pointing to the Russians. He perceived directly what had to be done. Move the whole battalion into the Soviet Union and overthrow Stalin. And that would have saved the world from a lot of trouble. And to be able to see that in that moment, I would say, is pretty unique. And that had to do with his excellent use of himself. Not as excellent as Primrose, but in his position, paired with his strategic and rather strong-willed behavior, that was excellent. Many years later, he was proven completely right. And that action could actually have avoided the Cold War entirely and made both the Americans and of course the Russians extremely happy, because Stalin was a horrible menace, and it was in reality no much of a difference between Stalin and Hitler himself. They were pretty ruthless dictators. So you can see here, if you open up space in between each movement, you will be able to act in this moment. And that could mean from an external clock time that you become incredibly quick. But don't think this is real. But if we should use that as a measure, you will be very quick. I have to mention, I actually looked him up, and he has written as a bit, we talked about him earlier, and that's Roger Federer. And Roger Federer also says that when it goes good, he moves in slow motion. Nothing is happening. And he can see it take, like, it says, 10-15 minutes to do the smash. Of course, he had all the opportunity in the world to change direction, to change force, to change position, to change stamina, view, direction, you name it, everything he could change. Because he extended time. And that's very interesting. It has to do with timing, and if we get really wrong in misuse, we are doomed to do mistiming all the time. Our words will not be fitting the position. And it's almost like our thinking does not produce action. We're starting feeling a glitch. So we have thinking here, and we have action here. And there is an unknown distance in between that. Both Primrose and George Smith Patton witnessed to say that their thinking was effective. I think it, and it happens, that's what Primrose said. And my thinking has force. That was from Patton. I think it's highly interesting, because most people today think about thinking it's some eternal, transcendental thing that doesn't really have an effect. It doesn't take much power, doesn't take much willpower, doesn't take much energy. And it's easily done. And one saying that rings in my ear, you can think whatever you want, there's no limits to your thinking powers. Yes, there is, of course. Because the limits of the thinking power is the limits of the world. And no one's world is equal. We're all different when it comes to that. Because what matters is how you use it. And it's such a big difference. And just as Primrose could outplay everyone on this earth, of course George Smith Patton couldn't outplay any general. But the power is not the most interesting. The most interesting is the ease you do it with. Both you can see on video films. They move with ease, like it's some fun thing you're in. I wouldn't think it's fun to be in a war. But if you look at Patton, he's on the playground, having a big ball, enjoying himself. And that sort of ease you can actually reach. And that's possible for everyone. As long as you have arms and a spine, I would say. You don't even have to have legs. But at least you have a spine and some arms, you can do that. There is no limit to human development once you understand this very, very important clue. And that's to get in before the action is executed. And then you can change and have any action you want. And as I mentioned before, your system is changing too. So it's getting easier after a while. When the T2s are disappearing and T1 takes over, those are actually muscles that will obey your thoughts, whereas T2 never does. They are completely involuntarily managed. They are actually managed by this reflex. So that means that you can't determine how much force you want to put into your arm when you do something. And that means that you can't do the specific things you want with your hand. But it also means you can't do the specific things you want with your thinking. Both things get blunt. Both things get discarded. Because thinking is action. And word is the word. It's just this discrepancy we most feel. We people in misuse, we feel this discrepancy because it's a bodily effect. Inherited from the Greek, but much developed by us. Made bigger and bigger and bigger. In the end, we produce ideas like being brain in the vat, which I think is completely ridiculous. It's absolute nonsense. How anyone could propose such a figure, it's just beyond me. That person, Searle or Putnam, whoever did it, I'm going to find it out. Whoever did it, he must have been so out of his own world, of the world. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was Searle. I see him in TV interviews and in debates with Derrida. He doesn't have a body sense for anything. He could actually think that he's in a vat because he doesn't feel his body. And it has all to do with his tendency to cut off and call one thing consciousness and the body unconscious. That's where it starts. And I say thank you very much and bid you all a very good evening, night.
Thank you all.